She's just a gate guard." That's what my sister announced to a room full of wedding guests, her voice sharp enough to slice through champagne glasses. Everyone laughed or looked away. What none of them knew was that before the night was over, I'd be standing in front of hundreds, not as a guest, not as a gate guard, but as something none of them expected to see. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. That day, I arrived a little early, not because I wanted to, but because I'd promised Mom I would. The breeze coming in off the water smelled faintly of salt and roses. Newport always had that strange mix of ocean and wealth. I stood at the entrance of the beachfront resort, squinting through the glass doors. Everyone inside looked like they belonged. Linen suits, polished nails, soft laughs over talk of stocks and real estate. I tugged gently at the hem of my navy blue dress. It wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't couture, and I knew the difference. The floor beneath my heels was too smooth. Everything about this place felt like it was meant to glide. I was just trying not to trip. I walked past the welcome table where a woman with a clipboard barely glanced at me before saying, "Vendors go around the back." I tightened my lips in something that looked polite, but wasn't. "I'm family." That made her pause. She rechecked the list, lips pursed. "Oh, you must be the Laurel's sister." A voice behind me called out, loud and bright, like a bell meant to summon attention. I turned. There she was, in a gold cocktail dress that shimmered like sunlight on water. Laurel had always known how to own a room. Her laugh rang sharp like glass clinking too close to my ear. Her arms opened wide, but not for a hug. "That's my sister." "Just a gate guard," she said, as if she were reading the label off a jar she hadn't meant to bring to the party. Someone gave a short, nervous laugh. Glass stems tapped against the tray. The man next to her shifted uncomfortably. I nodded once. Not at her, but toward the people now staring at me like I was the punchline of a joke they'd missed. I walked forward and extended a hand to the man beside her. Thomas, her college boyfriend. The one who used to help me fix my old Chevy in our driveway when Laurel was too busy FaceTiming her sorority sisters. His grip was light. He didn't meet my eyes. I let go quickly. The champagne tray came around. I took one. I don't drink. But I held it anyway. It sat cold in my palm, a quiet prop, something to fill the space where words should go. I stood there, still as the glass, watching as Laurel turned back to her crowd, dismissing me like a smudge she'd wiped off a mirror. "That was uncalled for," someone whispered behind me, a woman, maybe early 60s, with hair like silver clouds and a voice like warm tea. I didn't look at her, didn't need to. I knew that kind of tone, the kind strangers use when they feel sorry for you but don't want to get involved. I dipped my chin slightly, more reflex than reply, just enough to say, "I heard you." The music picked up. The room shifted. People returned to their conversations about the best wine cellars in Sonoma and whether Nate had really left his firm for ethical reasons or something more scandalous. I stayed near the edge, where the air smelled less like perfume and more like the sea. The champagne was still full. It was always like this with Laurel, her words wrapped in sugar, sharpened with lemon zest. My presence tolerated like background noise until it became an inconvenience. Once she'd cried in my lap because a boy forgot her birthday. I'd driven through snow at midnight to pick her up from a party where no one noticed she was gone. But that part of me, the part that used to excuse everything, had gone quiet. I wasn't here for her. I was here for Mom, and even that was starting to feel like a thread stretched too thin. I caught my father watching me from across the room. He raised a glass in greeting, then turned away before I could respond. The sea outside darkened. The lights inside glowed warmer, and I kept holding that untouched champagne, as if by not drinking it, I could somehow stay sober to the truth everyone else was willing to ignore. I thought, just survive the evening. But I should have known better. This wasn't going to be a night that let me slip through unseen, so I slipped out the balcony door instead. The balcony door whispered shut behind me as I stepped into the fading light. I hadn't realized how loud the ballroom was until I escaped it. Voices blending with clinking glasses, artificial laughter echoing off marble floors. Out here, there was just the hush of the sea and the distant rhythm of waves brushing the shore. The breeze tugged at the hem of my dress. I leaned forward on the railing, fingers curling around the cool metal, eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was lowering itself into the water like a slow exhale, casting a copper wash over the ocean's surface. Seagulls floated lazily above the rocks, indifferent to the human theater behind me. I didn't need a mirror to know I didn't fit. My reflection had already been drawn in the faces around me, tight smiles, sideways glances, curiosity disguised as politeness. I'd spent years learning how to disappear in a room like that. Tonight I wasn't doing it very well. The salt in the air reminded me of those first graveyard shifts at the base, back when I was still figuring out if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life by enlisting. I remembered standing at the outer fence, listening to static and half-mumbled dispatches crackle over the radio, the kind of loneliness that didn't roar. It hummed, quiet, constant. And I remembered thinking, if something happened to me out there, would anyone notice before sunrise? Behind me, the balcony door opened again. I didn't turn. I knew how to be still, how to blend into shadow. Footsteps paused, followed by the flick of a lighter. A sharp scent of tobacco mingled with the ocean breeze. Then a voice, low and calm. "They don't know what they're looking at," the man said, "but I do." I didn't reply right away. My eyes stayed on the water. Finally, I said, "You see a woman in a dress sitting alone on a balcony. That's all." There was a puff of smoke. "No, I see someone who's stood post, alone. Someone who's had to wait out the night with nothing but a radio and their own thoughts." I glanced sideways. He was leaning against the railing, suit jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened. His hair was salt and pepper, not styled, just honest. The kind of man who didn't bother with pretending to be younger than he was. The cigarette dangled between his fingers like an afterthought. "You served?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. 18 years, Army, signals. Then I picked up a camera and started shooting people instead of terrain. He offered a half smile. "Name's Dane." I gave him a nod. "Rowan." He didn't extend a hand. I appreciated that. The quiet stretched comfortably like a blanket we both recognized. "Funny," he said after a moment, "how you can be surrounded by people, music, champagne, and still feel like the one ghost in the room." I said nothing. He'd already spoken the truth. "You know," Dane continued, "people see what they want. Titles, jobs, dresses. But there's a look in someone's eyes when they've stood watch. You don't forget it once you've lived it." I couldn't decide which unsettled me more, that he'd noticed, or that I didn't immediately deflect. He didn't press. Just flicked ash over the edge and looked out toward the horizon. Then he added, "You ever feel like you're invited just to remind you where you don't belong?" That time, I laughed, dry, from the chest. "Every time Laurel throws a party," I said, "she treats my presence like a form of community service." He chuckled. "Then she has no idea who you are." I shrugged. "She knows enough." "No," Dane said firmly. "She knows the version of you that makes her feel taller." "That's not the same thing." The words sank deeper than I wanted them to. I looked down at the untouched champagne in my hand, still full, still cold. My grip had relaxed around the stem, but I hadn't let go. He nodded toward the glass. "Why hold it if you're not going to drink it?" I stared at it a moment. Habit. He didn't ask more, just stood beside me as the sun finally dipped below the edge of the world. "Hey," he said as he stubbed out the cigarette, "don't let them tell you who you are. They only know what you let them see." Laurel's laugh followed, bright and jagged, cutting into the hallway. Dane stepped aside, but not away. "Back into the fire?" he asked, with a sideways glance. I nodded. Not the first time. And I walked back in, letting the music swallow me whole. They sat me at a folding table near the back, tucked between a half-drawn curtain and a rolling cart of spare chairs. My place card, if you could call it that, was a torn piece of ivory cardstock. The ink smudged where someone had clearly written my name in haste. Rowan. Not Rowan. Slanted. Off-center. Like they couldn't even be bothered to ask. The rest of the ballroom looked like a curated dream. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the ocean, which glistened gold as the last stretch of daylight folded into twilight. The air inside was perfumed with peony centerpieces and the subtle tang of buttered scallops. Laurel's vision had been executed down to the last polished spoon. I straightened my shoulders and folded my napkin across my lap, more out of habit than any attempt to belong. This wasn't my world, and even now, after all these years, I knew it never would be. My father's voice cut through the music. "That one's mine," he announced, loud enough for several heads to turn. "She's a gate guard. Keeps people out of parking lots. You know, important national security stuff." A snicker followed, not his. Probably someone trying to impress him. Then came the kicker. "But my new son-in-law, he's a partner at Goldman Sachs. Can you believe it?" I didn't turn. I didn't need to. I could see him in my mind. Broad stance, cocktail in hand, proud grin curling beneath his mustache like always. I gripped my glass of water, knuckles pale. Not out of anger, but to keep from floating out of my own body. That used to happen sometimes. Disassociating during family dinners, deployment briefings, even during roadside inspections in Kandahar. My body stayed. My mind drifted. A woman in an emerald dress sat beside me, brushing imaginary lint from her lap. She offered a polite smile. "I heard you served overseas." "That's admirable." I smiled back, careful not to show teeth. "Thank you. It was a long time ago." She nodded like she understood, but I knew she didn't. Her gaze flitted to the main table where Laurel posed for photos, champagne flutes lifted around her like a crown of crystal. The woman leaned closer. "Your sister seems radiant tonight." I didn't respond. Not because I disagreed, but because I knew exactly what Laurel looked like when she thought the world revolved around her, and tonight it just might. From the other side of the room, Laurel caught my eye and tilted her head. Then, turning to her table of friends, college sorority sisters, all angles and confidence, she smiled wide. "She doesn't belong here." Never has. It wasn't even whispered. The sentence came out like she was delivering the punchline to a joke everyone already knew. Some people at the table laughed. Others looked away. My chest hollowed out, scraped clean of even surprise. Just that old, familiar hollowing out, like someone scooping you from the inside with a silver spoon. I reached under the table and typed a message to Dane. "You can duck out now. No judgment. This isn't your war." His reply came faster than I expected. "If I leave now, who's going to capture the exact frame where you finally snap?" Relief crept into my shoulders, easing the tight line of my back. My mother passed by our table, pretending not to notice me. She looked elegant in mauve silk, every hair pinned like a sculpture. Her hand brushed Dad's arm lightly, like she'd done for decades, just enough to say I'm still here without saying a word. The band shifted to a slow instrumental. Silverware scraped lightly over porcelain. Someone began a toast. I raised my water glass to my lips and paused when I saw my reflection, warped by the glass, stretched into something unfamiliar. I tilted it left, then right. My eyes followed mine, but I didn't recognize them. That's when it hit me. Not the insult, not even Laurel's words, but the realization. I'd been trying to mold myself into someone they might respect. All the medals, deployments, certificates. I'd stacked them like sandbags around my identity, hoping it would be enough to keep their disapproval from seeping in. And still, I'd ended up here, at the folding table. Misspelled name, wrong dress, wrong room. I turned slightly, catching sight of the ocean beyond the glass. The horizon didn't care who my father was. It just existed, vast, unbothered, honest. The woman beside me reached for her purse. "Weddings are funny," she murmured. "So many people trying so hard to pretend they're a family." I didn't answer. The only reply I had was the tightness in my throat and the way my grip eased on the water glass, letting it rest gently on the white tablecloth without a sound. A moment later, I stood up, telling myself I only meant to find the restroom. The noise inside the ballroom had gotten thick, forks clinking, champagne fizzing, conversations layered one over the other like foghorns in the mist. I needed air. Or maybe just silence. Something to remind me I was still anchored to my own body. I slipped past a group of bridesmaids gathered near the dessert table, murmuring about flights and shoes and whose lips looked too glossy for photos. The hallway was dimmer, the way service corridors always are, paint duller, carpet thinned by years of carts rolling over the same track. Halfway down, I paused. 2 men stood by the access door to the kitchens, talking low, too low. One held a tray with a single flute of champagne, untouched. The other leaned against the wall like he was guarding it, not waiting for instructions. They didn't look like they belonged, and I wasn't saying that because their hair wasn't shellacked like the other staff, or their aprons didn't sit straight. It was the stance. The way their feet pointed slightly outward, ready to shift direction in an instant. The way their heads didn't just nod to each other, but scanned the corridor in sync. Their uniforms were close, but not exact. The sleeves too short, collars a fraction off-white. The shoes were wrong, too. Hard-soled tactical black instead of the soft foam non-slips every banquet server I've ever seen wears. I ducked into the alcove by the drink station, behind a row of boxed wine chilling in plastic tubs. From where I crouched, I could make out a third man entering from the loading door, brushing something small into his jacket pocket. No one handed him anything. He just nodded once and said, "Wait till after the kiss." 2 million clean. My lungs stalled, but my pulse stayed steady. A different part of me, some buried mechanism, kicked in. The same part that kept me still when bullets snapped too close. The same one that walked calmly across a tarmac in Ramadi while locals stared like they'd never seen a woman in uniform. I stepped back, letting the shadows swallow me. No weapon, no comms, no badge. Just training and muscle memory. I pulled my phone from my clutch, fingers steady, thumb moving fast. 911. Newport Grand Resort. I think there's a planned attack. 3 men dressed as staff. Suspicious behavior. One mentioned a $2 million payout. No, I don't know their target. Maybe the couple, maybe guests. Possibly high profile, the dispatcher's voice crackled. "We have units 15 minutes out." 15. I bit back the curse rising in my throat. In 15 minutes, I'd watched convoys burn. I'd carried 2 bodies in blackout conditions. I'd seen a man breathe his last between one tick of the clock and the next. 15 minutes is eternity. I ended the call, then looked at my reflection in the stainless steel beer tap behind the bar. The smeared outline of a woman in a burgundy dress, one hand trembling slightly, the other clenched like she still carried a sidearm. I wasn't invited to save anyone here. Hell, I wasn't even invited to speak. But standing there, I remembered something an old staff sergeant once barked during a training op. You don't wait to be asked when there's smoke. I slid back into the hallway and trailed the men, keeping distance, using the mirrored pillars to track movement. One peeled off toward the stage, another drifted toward the audio equipment, head down but eyes sharp. They weren't professionals, not real operatives anyway, probably hired muscle, maybe even desperate. That made them more dangerous. I moved quickly but kept my gait relaxed. Just a woman looking for the restroom, nothing more. I passed a catering door and slipped inside. Racks of plates lined one wall. Steam hissed from an industrial dishwasher. I grabbed a butter knife from a dirty tray, more out of instinct than logic. Not much use, but it felt better than empty hands. I texted Dane, "Leave now. Tell the couple something's off. Tell security if they'll listen. I'll stay. I need a head count." He replied within seconds. "What are you talking about? Are you okay? I'm not dressed for this, but I'm still a soldier. Just buy me 2 minutes." There was no time to wait for his reply. I stepped into the main hallway again, scanning the crowd with different eyes. Every guest now a potential target, every server a question mark. The air pressed heavy with spilled wine and body heat, but something colder coiled just underneath. No one knew. Not the band tuning their strings. Not the couple glowing under the chandelier. Not my sister, busy making sure the camera caught her best angle. And definitely not my father, still bragging about hedge funds, or my mother, so composed it was like her spine had been poured from porcelain. They wouldn't believe me if I shouted, so I didn't. I moved like I used to, quiet, unseen, a ghost with a butter knife and a plan half-formed. Because while they saw a gate guard, what I carried wasn't something you could hang on a uniform or stitch into a nameplate. It lived deeper. It followed me through the kitchen door and into the rising hum of something just about to go wrong. Out on the lawn, the music had already begun. It was one of those classical renditions of a pop song, strings lilting over the clipped hush of the audience. Chairs lined up in precise rows, white boughs fluttering against the breeze coming off the sea. The arch, draped in gauze and orchids, faced west, where the sky was beginning to melt from gold into violet. Cameras were rolling. Every movement had been choreographed, but no one saw what I saw. He was shifting too carefully. One of the men in the server's uniform had taken position behind the platform where the officiant stood. His hand drifted near his hip, not adjusting a waistband, not tucking a shirt, reaching, waiting. I slid free of my heels, my toes sinking into the cool grass. No one noticed. Not the woman fanning herself with the program, not the little boy in the bow tie tossing flower petals behind the flower girl, not Laurel, who turned just in time to see me dart toward the far side of the lawn, moving like a shadow between the cocktail bar and the DJ's booth. She narrowed her eyes, her lips parted, and I saw it, just a flicker of a smirk. She leaned into one of her friends and whispered something. I didn't need to hear it to know. It would be something like, "She can't help herself, always making a scene." From my angle, I caught a glimpse of Dad, jaw tightening. His hand gripped the back of the chair in front of him like he was preparing to bolt down the aisle to grab my elbow. And then the scream cut the air. A tray crashed against the wooden platform. Gasps rippled outward like shockwaves. One of the groomsmen jumped to his feet. Someone shouted, "What is that?" 2 men emerged, no longer trying to hide. One brandished a compact pistol, the kind you could slip behind a dish towel if you knew what you were doing. The other yanked the bride, Laurel, by the wrist, twisting her arm behind her back as she shrieked. And just like that, the air cracked open. No one moved. Not the groom, not the father-in-law who had bragged about offshore investments, not even security, because the resort had insisted on minimal staff for aesthetics. God forbid a guy in a black jacket ruin the photo backdrop. I surged forward, hand raised, not in surrender, but in command. "Put that down. Step away from her." My voice didn't tremble. It echoed across the lawn like it had come through a bullhorn, even though I had nothing but my own lungs. The man holding the gun faltered, his eyes jerking to mine. "She's one of them," the second man blurted. His hand tightened on Laurel's arm, but his voice betrayed panic. "She's trained." They saw it before my family did. Not just the stance, the calm, the precision. They saw the weight behind my voice, the way I assessed cover and distance in a split second, the way I didn't flinch when metal glinted under the sun. They saw the soldier. Laurel froze, her mouth half open, mascara streaked from tears welling. She was close enough now to see me, not as a sister, not as a nuisance, but as something she didn't understand, something she never even considered possible. I took 2 steps forward, palms low, voice steady. "Let her go." You don't want what comes next. No cops yet, one hissed. We still got time. You don't have time, I snapped. Your window closed the minute you picked this stage. They hesitated, and that was the crack I needed. A server, real this time, ducked behind a table, bumping a stack of plates that came crashing down. In that split-second distraction, Laurel twisted out of her captor's grip, elbow catching his chin, clumsy but enough. I lunged, kicking upward, heel of my bare foot slamming into the wrist, holding the pistol. It clattered onto the grass. He dove after it, but I was already on him. My knee jammed into his ribs, elbow against his throat. The second guy ran straight into the groom, who, to his credit, tackled him clumsily and ended up tangled in a folding chair. By the time hotel security came panting across the lawn, it was over. People screamed. Others recorded. Some simply stared, stunned into silence. A woman fainted. Somewhere near the buffet, a glass shattered. I stood there barefoot in a wine-colored dress, hair wind-blown, breathing hard. Laurel still half-crouched near the stage, the officiant blinking behind her. And Dad? Dad was frozen. Not in shock, exactly, but like a man who just realized he'd misjudged everything that mattered. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a burst of applause erupted from somewhere near the back row, then another, and then, absurdly, a cheer. The noise blurred at the edges, distant as static. I was watching Laurel. She looked up at me, not grateful, not even rattled, but like someone who'd seen a ghost crawl out of a mirror. The kind of ghost that doesn't ask permission to exist. Minutes later, inside the reception hall, it was chaos. Chairs overturned, champagne soaked into linens, people huddled in corners or crouched behind floral arrangements like it might protect them. A toddler wailed. The string quartet had abandoned their instruments. One of the groomsmen was on the phone, shaking so hard he dropped it. I stepped over a spilled bucket of ice and looked for the exits. Every second counted, and the only thing worse than panic was hesitation. Near the back wall, a middle-aged man in a linen blazer pointed at me, eyes wide. "Who the hell put her in charge?" I didn't stop moving. "Who are you exactly?" he demanded, still crouched behind the dessert table. "Someone who's not waiting to be told what to do," I said without turning. I passed a group of elderly guests trying to lift a woman in heels who'd twisted her ankle. Another was fanning her with a napkin, whispering prayers. I took 3 steady breaths and locked eyes with a younger man gripping a champagne bottle like a weapon. "You," I said, "put that down and come help me with the side doors." He nodded once, numb but willing. That's when I saw Dane. He was leaning against a column, breathing hard, blood streaking down one arm. His jacket was gone. His shirt was torn. A woman in her 70s clung to him, trembling. I rushed over. "Are you—" She tripped. Landed hard. "I caught her," he said simply. "Your arm?" "Grazed. I'm good." We didn't say anything else. Didn't need to. His gaze settled on me, steady as if anchoring himself there, like he'd already decided to trust me, even if he didn't know what came next. I pointed toward the kitchen hallway. "Get as many people as you can. Take them through catering storage and out the delivery dock. Don't wait for me. What about you?" "I'm going back out there." He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, but then just nodded. "Be careful, Hart." That was the first time he'd used my last name, not Laurel's sister, not the gate guard, just Hart. I moved quickly, slipping back toward the garden. The air had shifted. Tense, expectant. A breeze carried the scent of gunpowder and sweat. I saw one of the imposters pacing near the altar, weapon loose in his grip. His partner sat on the edge of the platform, holding his head like he regretted everything. They weren't professionals. Their movements weren't sharp. Their shoulders twitched, movements jittery, betraying nerves. Afraid. This wasn't a military op. This was a fantasy gone too far. The louder one, Jason, if I remembered from earlier chatter, was barking at a trembling wedding planner. "We want a chopper!" $2 million in cash. or we start making examples." He waved the pistol in lazy arcs. Someone nearby cried out. The bride was nowhere to be seen. Laurel must have been taken inside. I stepped into the open. He spun toward me. "Stay back!" "I'm not here to stop you," I said calmly, hands visible. "I want to talk." "You're with them, aren't you?" "Some kind of cop?" "No." I took a slow step forward. "I'm not with them." "Then who the hell are you?" I paused. "I'm someone who used to stand post at a checkpoint on the outskirts of Kandahar. Alone. With a radio that barely worked. I faced people who didn't think I'd live past sunrise." He stared. "I'm not here to die today. But I'm not here to panic either. You don't want to shoot anybody. That's not what this was supposed to be, is it?" He faltered. Behind him, the younger guy, barely more than a kid, whispered something. His hands were shaking. Jason snapped, "Shut up!" "They're already live streaming," I said, nodding toward a tripod camera still running near the back. "Every news outlet in the region is broadcasting this." He turned, noticed the red light blinking. I didn't wait. "If you keep going, your face becomes national. You'll be hunted, and not just by cops. Your parents will watch. Your old teachers. The girl who broke up with you in 10th grade. They'll all see what kind of man you are." He hesitated again. "You're not a killer," I added. "You're a boy who made a mistake." He blinked. His jaw clenched. I took another step forward, quietly scanning. Still no Laurel. Still no sign of backup. But the hostage takers were unraveling, thread by thread. "I can help you walk out of here," I said, "but not if you hurt anyone else." He looked around, and in that silence, I knew. I had him. Not through force, through clarity, through presence. Somewhere behind me, the door creaked open. More guests being moved through the side. I kept my voice low. It doesn't have to end badly. Jason let out a long breath. His weapon lowered just a few inches, but enough. His partner slumped like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. For a split second, the whole lawn held its breath. A woman in the back sobbed. The breeze lifted someone's veil, sending it drifting like a ghost across the aisle. I didn't move yet. I waited for his next move, because in that moment, the whole damn world was watching. The sirens arrived like the sound of something ancient cracking open. Red and blue lights sliced through the dusk, flickering against the torn petals and overturned chairs. Guests surged toward the perimeter, drawn to the commotion and yet desperate to get away from it. The moment the officers advanced, weapons drawn, the two imposters surrendered without resistance. One of them dropped to his knees so fast he scraped skin from his palms. The other, Jason, kept his hands raised high, breathing like someone had just yanked him back from a cliff. I didn't watch them get cuffed. I wasn't interested in justice, at least not in the courtroom kind. I stood quietly near the back of the altar space, brushing blades of grass and bits of mulch from my skirt. My knees were dirty. There was blood drying on my ankle. I didn't know whose. The fabric of my dress had torn along the hem, and a bobby pin had come loose in my hair. I adjusted the collar of my blazer, slid my hand over the fabric to smooth it, and exhaled. No one clapped. No one said thank you. Which was fine. I wasn't there for applause. I turned and started walking. The sound of someone chasing after me crunched through the gravel behind me. "Rowan, wait, hold up," came the familiar baritone, aged and panicked. Richard Hart, in his polished loafers and blue check sport coat, stumbled up beside me. "Don't go just yet," he panted. "The people are still... There's media. They're asking things." I didn't slow. He reached for my elbow and missed. "They're asking who you are." The press. That local affiliate from Channel 6 already set up a live mic. They said... I turned slightly. "What did you tell them?" He faltered. I told them you're my daughter, that you saved everyone." His voice cracked on the last word, like saying it out loud was harder than facing down a gun. I lowered my head briefly and kept moving. That moment of hesitation, his hesitation, was enough. He could have claimed me decades ago, chosen me over his own pride. He never had. Letting the cameras force his hand now didn't mean much. I crossed the pathway toward the archway where the bride had been due to walk. The flowers had fallen. One side had collapsed under someone's weight during the evacuation. From the far end of the lawn, Laurel appeared. Her gown was torn at the sleeve, mascara smudged under both eyes, but she still walked with her chin lifted, rehearsed elegance sewn into her spine. She blocked my path with one delicate arm. "Rowan, wait, just listen for a second." I didn't. "You don't get to explain," I said without raising my voice. "Not today." Her mouth opened and closed. She looked like she had an entire monologue stored behind her teeth, ready to spill. An apology, maybe, or a justification, or some flimsy attempt at rewriting the past 5 hours into something palatable. I stepped around her. The hush around her throbbed heavier than a scream. The reporters were gathering near the main entry. One had a windblown notepad. Another held a mic with a fuzzy blue foam top. They pointed toward the gate as I passed through it, and just outside the path, nestled in the grass, was the name tag I'd worn on my way in. Rowan Hart Gate Security, printed in bold caps, still attached to the plastic clip. It had fallen during the rush, maybe when I climbed over the service bar or ducked behind the planters. I hadn't noticed until now. I stooped to retrieve it, but before I could, a young woman, probably a junior producer from one of the news teams, snatched it up. She blinked at the title, then at me. "Is this?" I met her eyes. Said nothing. The shutter snapped, quick and merciless. She turned and showed it to her cameraman, who focused in tight. That small piece of plastic, meant to minimize me, now shone in the evening light like a medal no one could revoke. By the next morning, it would be all over social media. A screenshot of my back walking away, the title "Gate Guard" dangling in someone else's fingers, with captions like, "She protected everyone." They didn't even know her name. I kept going. Behind me, someone shouted my name. There was nothing left to say. I kept walking, past the cameras, past the whispers, until the noise behind me became just another memory. The coffee tasted like burnt almonds, but I didn't complain. Military base cafes rarely got things right. The brew was hot, the chairs stiff, and the windows clean. That was enough. Dane sat across from me, one hand wrapped around a chipped mug, the other scrolling through his phone. He'd healed well. The cut on his forearm was now just a faint red line. He hadn't spoken about that night, not in detail, but he never stopped looking at me like I was someone worth standing in front of. "Have you seen this?" he asked, flipping his phone toward me. The article loaded slowly. A photo, blurry but unmistakable, captured the scene at the wedding. Me standing, arms slightly outstretched, behind me the scattered chairs and broken archway. The headline read, "Operation Gate Guard." New veteran initiative launches, inspired by heroic guest. Below it, a short summary described the project, helping transition veterans from security details and base work into leadership roles. The founder had been a former Army sergeant who'd seen the clip of me online and decided it was time people stopped assuming gate guards weren't leaders. I let the words wash over me, not quite settling into my skin. Praise came to me like a foreign tongue, halting and strange. Still, I smiled. Dane watched my face instead of the screen. "You okay with it?" "Them using your story?" I shrugged, but not with indifference. "It's not mine to keep. If it helps someone else walk through the fire and know they're more than the uniform they wear, I'm okay with that." My phone buzzed, vibrating lightly against the metal tabletop. The name that popped up on the screen didn't surprise me. Richard Hart. One unread email. I tapped it open. Subject, just one thing. Body, "I'm sorry. If you'd ever want to talk." That was it. No signature, no quotes. just a handful of words he hadn't managed to say out loud in 33 years. I read it twice, then tapped the dot in the corner and marked it as read. I didn't delete it, but I didn't reply either. I glanced outside the wide glass pane beside us. Jets lined the tarmac in a silent row, and beyond them, the sky was all blue. The pale kind that comes after a storm, when the light hasn't quite decided if it wants to stay. It reminded me of Sundays with Mom. She used to sit in her lawn chair, glass of iced tea in hand, and say, "You don't go somewhere to prove anything. You go because you know you belong. I didn't belong in that wedding." But I had every right to be there. Across from me, Dane had gone quiet again. Not the awkward kind, the peaceful kind, like someone who knows you don't always need to speak to understand. "Do you regret going?" he asked, gently. I tilted my face away, lips pressed tight. I used to think I needed them to see me, that I had to be in the room, wearing the right dress, saying the right things, for them to let me stay. He waited. "But now I know," I said. "I was never waiting for their invitation. I was just waiting to stop asking for it." He raised his mug toward mine, to never asking again. Our mugs touched softly, a muted tap in the quiet, just the soft touch of two people who'd both come through things they never planned to speak of often. When I got home that night, I unpacked slowly, tossed the travel bag on the couch, kicked off my boots, and then I opened the closet. In between my dress blues and a pair of old jeans, there it was. The navy gown, still wrinkled, still torn at the hem. I didn't fold it. I just left it hanging there. A quiet reminder that I'd survived that day, not by blending in or being perfect, but by standing exactly as I was, and not apologizing for it. Some people wait their whole lives for recognition, a title, an apology, a seat at the table. But sometimes, the real power lies in walking away without needing any of it. I didn't get closure from every person who hurt me, but I found clarity in who I'd become without their approval. What about you? Have you ever realized you were more than the version someone else decided you were? If this story stirred something in you, I hope you'll stick around. Subscribe to the channel. I've got more stories to tell for all of us who had to become strong in the silence.